mail-order husband arrived in rags, but the cowboy's daughter saw his worth and married him. The small frontier town rested under a pale morning sky as the sound of the distant train echoed across the open land. Dust lifted from the dry road and drifted through the air like soft smoke. People stepped out from shops and homes, curious and quiet, drawn by the promise of something new. For them, the arrival of the train was always an event, even if it only brought mail, tools, or a few tired travelers. Clara stood near the wooden platform beside her father, the cowboy who owned one of the largest ranches in the area. Her hands were folded in front of her, and her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. She had agreed to this meeting, even though she did not know what to expect. The letters had been kind and careful, written in a neat hand by a man who called himself Samuel. He spoke of hard work, respect, and a wish to build a simple life. But letters could hide many things, and Clara knew this meeting would decide more than just a first impression. Her father stood tall and silent, his eyes fixed on the tracks. He had agreed to the plan because he wanted Clara to have a steady future, someone who could help with the land and carry on the work of the ranch. Still, he did not fully trust a man he had never seen. He believed that strength showed itself in how a man stood, how he spoke, and how he met the world. The train slowed, its wheels screeching against the rails. Steam rose into the sky as it came to a stop. The doors opened, and a few people stepped down, stretching their legs and looking around. Then Samuel appeared. He was thinner than Clara had imagined. His clothes were worn and faded, and his boots showed deep cracks from long walks on hard ground. He carried a small bag that looked light enough to hold only a few belongings. His hat was bent at the edges, and his face was marked by sun and wind. People around them whispered, some with pity, others with quiet judgment. Clara felt her father shift beside her. She knew what he was thinking. This was not the strong ranch hand or bold partner he had pictured. This was a man who looked like he had already given much of himself just to survive. But when Samuel lifted his eyes, Clara saw something that made her pause. There was no fear in them, no shame. They were calm and steady, as if he had learned to face whatever came his way with patience instead of anger. He stepped forward slowly, careful not to draw attention, and stopped in front of them. "Miss Clara?" he asked in a soft, clear voice. She nodded. "Yes." "You must be Samuel." He gave a small smile, one that did not try to impress or hide anything. "It's good to finally meet you." Her father cleared his throat. "I'm her father," he said, his voice firm. "We've got a long ride back to the ranch." Samuel nodded. "I'm grateful for the chance to come," he replied. "I'll do my best to earn my place." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Clara felt something shift inside her. He did not speak like someone who expected anything to be handed to him. He spoke like someone who was ready to work for every step forward. They loaded Samuel's small bag onto the back of the wagon. The ride to the ranch was quiet at first, filled only with the sound of the wheels and the wind moving through the tall grass. Clara sat across from Samuel, studying him without being obvious. She noticed how he watched the land, the sky, and the animals they passed, as if he was already learning how everything fit together. After some time, Samuel spoke. "It's wide out here," he said. "Feels like the world has more room to breathe." Clara smiled slightly. "It does. It can be hard, but it's honest." He nodded. "That's all I'm looking for?" When they reached the ranch, the sun was higher in the sky. The buildings stood strong against the open land, and the sound of horses and workers filled the air. Samuel stepped down from the wagon and looked around, taking it all in. He did not seem overwhelmed. Instead, he looked ready. From that first day, Samuel made himself useful. He did not wait to be told what to do. He watched how the others worked and followed their lead. He helped carry water, repair fences, and guide the horses into their pens. His movements were careful and steady, even when the work was heavy. Some of the workers looked at him with doubt. They whispered that he would not last long, that his thin frame and quiet ways would slow him down. But Samuel did not respond to their words. He simply kept working. Clara watched from a distance, her feelings mixed with curiosity and respect. She saw how he treated everyone the same, whether it was her father or the youngest ranch hand. He spoke kindly, listened more than he talked, and never acted as if he was above any task. That evening, they sat together outside the main house as the sky turned gold and pink. Clara brought him a cup of water, and he thanked her with the same gentle smile. "It's good to sit for a moment," he said. "The day goes by fast when you keep moving." She laughed softly. "You worked harder than most of them today." He shrugged. "I've learned that if you give the day your best, it gives you something back." Her father watched from the doorway, saying nothing, but Clara could tell he was paying attention. Later that night, as the stars filled the sky, Clara lay awake thinking about the man who had arrived with almost nothing. She thought about how people had judged him before he even spoke, how she had almost done the same. She realized that strength did not always look like loud words or wide shoulders. Sometimes it looked like quiet effort and steady steps forward. Samuel, in a small room near the barn, also lay awake. He thought about the long road that had brought him here. He remembered the losses, the empty nights, and the moments when he had nearly given up on finding a place to belong. The ranch felt different. It felt like a chance, not just to work, but to become something more than he had been before. The next morning came early, and Samuel was already outside when the sun rose. Clara saw him in the distance, helping guide the horses, his movements sure and calm. She felt a small spark of pride even though she barely knew him. The town might see a man in worn clothes and tired boots. Her father might see a risk he had not planned for, but Clara was starting to see a story still being written, one that did not begin or end with what a person owned, but with who they chose to be. As the day unfolded, the ranch moved with its usual rhythm, but something had changed. A quiet presence had joined their world, and with it came the promise of something new. Clara did not know where this path would lead, but she felt ready to walk it step by step beside the man who had arrived as a stranger and was slowly becoming part of their lives. The morning light spread across the ranch like a soft blanket, turning the open land into shades of gold and green. Birds moved through the air, and the sound of hooves and voices slowly filled the space. Clara stepped outside with a deep breath, ready to begin another long day. She noticed Samuel near the barn, already busy with a bucket of water and a brush for the horses. He worked with quiet care, speaking in a calm tone that seemed to settle the animals. The horses, usually restless in the early hours, stood still as he moved the brush along their sides. Clara paused for a moment to watch. There was something gentle in the way he handled them, as if he understood their moods without needing words. Her father came out soon after, his eyes scanning the land and the workers. When he saw Samuel, he nodded once, a small sign of approval that did not go unnoticed. Samuel returned the nod, respectful and simple, then went back to his work. As the day unfolded, Samuel took on every task offered to him. He helped mend a fence that had fallen during the night. He carried heavy sacks of grain to the storage shed. He joined the other hands in guiding the cattle across the lower field. His clothes gathered more dust and sweat, but he never complained. Each job seemed to be another step toward proving that he belonged. The town was not far from the ranch, and later that afternoon, Clara rode in with Samuel to pick up supplies. The streets were busy with people going about their business. Some looked at Samuel with curiosity, others with doubt. A few whispered behind their hands, their eyes drifting toward his worn boots and faded shirt. Clara felt a small twist in her chest. She slowed her horse so she could ride closer to him. Samuel noticed and gave her a quiet look of thanks, though he did not say anything. He walked with his head held high, not in pride, but in calm strength. Inside the general store, the owner greeted Clara warmly. His smile faded slightly when he turned to Samuel. "You new around here?" he asked. Samuel nodded. "Just arrived. I'm working at the ranch." The man studied him for a moment, then handed over the items Clara had asked for. The exchange was polite but distant. As they left, Clara felt the weight of the town's eyes follow them. On the ride back, she broke the silence.
"They can be slow to trust," she said.
Samuel smiled gently. "So was I once. It just takes time." His words stayed with her. She realized that he did not expect the world to change for him. He was ready to change himself, step by step, until he fit into it. That evening, a neighbor came riding up in a hurry. One of his fence lines had broken, and some of his animals had wandered off. Without being asked, Samuel grabbed his hat and followed him. Clara watched as they disappeared into the fading light. Hours passed before they returned. Samuel's face was tired and his hands were scratched, but there was a quiet sense of relief in his eyes. The animals had been found and guided back. The neighbor thanked him again and again, his voice full of gratitude. Clara's father saw this from the porch. He did not speak, but the way he watched Samuel told Clara that his view was changing. Later, they all sat down for a simple meal. The table was filled with warm food and soft conversation. Samuel listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, his words were thoughtful and kind. He asked Clara's father about the land, about the history of the ranch, and about the seasons that shaped their lives. Her father answered, surprised by the genuine interest. For the first time, he asked Samuel about his own past. Samuel paused, then spoke of moving from place to place, of working on different farms and jobs, always searching for something that felt like home. He did not share every detail, but what he did share was honest and open. As the days passed, small changes began to show. The workers started to joke with Samuel. The town greeted him with nods instead of stares. The neighbor who had lost his animals spread word of Samuel's help, and people began to see him as more than just a stranger. Clara found herself spending more time with him. They walked along the edge of the fields in the evenings, talking about simple things. She told him about her childhood, about growing up under wide skies and learning to ride before she could properly read. He listened with interest, his eyes bright with every story. He told her about his love for quiet places, for mornings when the world felt still and full of promise. He spoke about the value of small moments, like a shared meal or a kind word, and how those moments could carry a person through hard times. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in. The sky darkened and the wind picked up, bending the grass low. The workers rushed to secure the tools and guide the animals to shelter. Samuel moved quickly, helping wherever he was needed. Rain poured down, soaking everyone, but no one stopped. When the storm finally passed, the ranch stood wet and tired, but safe. Samuel stood near the barn, his clothes clinging to him, his hair damp and messy. Clara brought him a dry cloth and a warm drink. He thanked her, his smile wide and grateful. Her father watched this exchange. He walked over and placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "You did good today," he said. It was a simple sentence, but it meant more than a long speech. Samuel nodded, clearly moved. That night, Clara sat by her window, looking out at the quiet land. She thought about how much had changed in such a short time. The man who had arrived with a small bag and worn clothes was now becoming part of their daily lives. He was no longer just a guest. He was someone the ranch relied on. Samuel, in his small room, felt the same sense of change. He felt a warmth in his chest that he had not known in years. The ranch, the people, and especially Clara, were becoming more than just a stop on his long journey. They were becoming a place he wanted to protect and care for. The future still felt uncertain, but it no longer felt empty. Both Clara and Samuel could sense that they were standing at the beginning of something meaningful, something built not on promises made in letters, but on actions taken every day under the wide, open sky. The land felt different that morning. The sky was clear, but the air carried a quiet tension, as if something unseen was waiting to happen. Clara noticed it when she stepped outside. The wind moved through the grass in slow waves, and the birds were quieter than usual. She pulled her jacket closer and looked toward the fields where Samuel was already working. He was repairing a gate near the lower pasture, his movements careful and focused. Clara walked toward him, the sound of her boots soft on the dirt. "Good morning," she said. He looked up and smiled. "Morning." The gate hinge came loose. "I didn't want the animals wandering off." She nodded, watching as he tightened the metal piece back into place. There was something steady in the way he worked, like he trusted his hands to do what needed to be done without rushing. They walked back together toward the main area of the ranch. Clara's father was giving instructions to the workers for the day. The river that ran along the edge of their land had risen slightly during the night. The recent rain had filled it more than usual, and he wanted everyone to keep an eye on it. Samuel listened closely, his eyes following the line of trees that marked the river's path. He had learned enough about the land to know that water could be both a gift and a danger. By midday, the sun was high, and the heat pressed down on everyone. The workers took short breaks under the shade of the barn. Clara brought out water and bread, passing it around. Samuel thanked her, sitting on an overturned crate, his face calm but thoughtful. He looked toward the river again. "It's moving faster than yesterday," he said quietly. Clara followed his gaze. She could see the water glimmering through the trees, wider and darker than before. Her father overheard and nodded. "We'll keep watch," he said. "If it rises more, we may need to move the animals to higher ground." The afternoon stretched on, slow and heavy. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain even though the sky was still clear. Samuel went back to work, but his eyes kept drifting toward the river. Then it happened. A shout came from one of the workers near the lower field. "The water's coming up fast." Clara felt her heart jump. Her father was already moving, calling out orders. Workers ran toward the fields, guiding the animals away from the river's edge. Samuel did not hesitate. He grabbed a rope and ran toward the lower pasture where a group of animals had not yet been moved. The ground was soft under his feet, and the sound of rushing water grew louder with every step. Clara wanted to follow, but her father held her back. "Stay here," he said firmly. "Help the others." She watched as Samuel reached the animals. The water had begun to spill over the bank, spreading across the grass in dark, fast-moving lines. He moved carefully, waving his arms and calling out, guiding the animals toward higher ground. One of the animals slipped in the mud, struggling to stand. Without thinking, Samuel ran to it, pulling on the rope and pushing from behind. The water soaked his boots, then climbed higher up his legs. The animal finally found its footing and moved away, joining the others. Samuel turned back, his breath heavy. The water was rising faster now. He took a step and nearly lost his balance. For a moment, Clara's heart felt like it stopped. "Samuel," she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. He looked up, saw her, and nodded once, as if to say he was all right. He moved carefully, step by step, until he reached the higher ground. The workers rushed to help him up the small slope. Everyone stood there, wet and breathing hard, watching the river claim the lower field. The animals were safe. The land was not. Clara ran to Samuel. "Are you okay?" she asked, her hand shaking as she looked at him. He smiled, tired, but steady. "I'm fine. Just a bit wet." Her father walked over, his face serious. He looked at the flooded field, then at Samuel. "You didn't have to go that far," he said. Samuel met his eyes. They needed help. "So I went." There was a long moment of silence. Then Clara's father reached out and shook Samuel's hand, his grip firm. "Thank you," he said. "You saved us a lot of loss today." The words carried more weight than any praise Samuel had ever received. He nodded, clearly moved, and looked down at his wet boots. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The workers secured what they could and marked the areas where the water had spread. Clara stayed close to Samuel, bringing him dry clothes and warm food. As the sun set, the ranch grew quiet again. The river still moved fast, but it stayed within its new path. The danger had passed, at least for now. That evening, Clara and Samuel sat on the porch, watching the sky turn from gold to deep blue. The stars began to appear, one by one. "I thought I lost you today," Clara said softly. Samuel looked at her, surprised.
"You didn't," he replied. "I'm still here."
She nodded, but her eyes were serious. "You always put others first." He thought for a moment. "I've been alone for a long time," he said. When you're alone, you learn how much it matters when someone stands beside you. I don't want anyone here to feel like they're facing things on their own. Clara felt a warmth in her chest. She realized that what drew her to him was not just his hard work, but his heart. Her father joined them after a while. He sat down, looking out at the land he had worked his whole life to build. "You did more than save animals today," he said to Samuel. "You showed us who you are." Samuel shifted slightly, not sure what to say. "You belong here," her father continued, "if you choose to stay." Samuel looked at Clara, then back at her father. "I do choose to stay," he said simply. The words felt like a promise, not just to the ranch, but to the people who lived on it. That night, Clara lay in her bed, listening to the distant sound of the river. She thought about the fear she had felt and the relief that followed. She realized how deeply Samuel's place in her life had already grown. Samuel lay awake, too, staring at the ceiling of his small room. He thought about the moment in the water, the way Clara had called his name, and the way her father had thanked him. For the first time in a long while, he felt something close to peace. The land would face more storms. The future would bring more challenges, but now they would face them together, not as strangers, but as people connected by trust, courage, and the quiet strength that had grown between them under the wide, open sky. The days after the river rose felt slower, as if the land itself needed time to breathe again. The lower field stayed covered in dark, wet soil, and the workers moved their tasks to the higher ground. The ranch still carried the sound of life, but there was a new, quiet respect in the air. People looked at Samuel differently now. He was no longer just the man who arrived with a small bag and worn clothes. He was the man who had stepped forward when the land tested them. Clara noticed the change first in small ways. The workers greeted Samuel by name instead of with short nods. The neighbor who had once rushed in for help now stopped by just to talk. Even the store owner in town asked Samuel how the ranch was holding up. Each moment added another thread that tied Samuel closer to this place. One evening, Clara and Samuel walked along the edge of the higher field. The sun was low, painting the sky in soft orange and pink. The grass moved gently under the breeze, and the world felt calm again. "I never thought I would stay in one place this long," Samuel said quietly. "I used to think moving was the only way to keep going." Clara looked at him. "What made you stop here?" He thought for a moment. "I think it was the feeling of being needed and being seen." Her heart felt light at his words. She realized that she felt the same way about him. He was no longer just someone who worked beside her. He was someone who stood with her. At the ranch, Clara's father watched them from a distance. He saw the way they walked together, their steps matching without effort. He remembered his own younger days, when the land had been new to him, and every choice felt like it could change his whole life. That night, he called Samuel to sit with him on the porch. The sky was clear and the stars were bright. "You've earned more than a place to work here," he said. "You've earned my respect." Samuel lowered his eyes. "That means a lot to me." Clara's father nodded. "Clara deserves someone who will stand by her, not just when things are easy, but when they are hard. I've seen how you act when the land pushes back." Samuel took a deep breath. "I don't promise to be perfect," he said, "but I promise to be steady." The words felt honest and strong. Clara's father held his gaze, then nodded. The town held a small gathering a few days later. It was meant to bring people together after the storm and the rising river. There was simple food, soft music, and the warm sound of voices filling the open space near the center of town. Clara and Samuel arrived together. Some people smiled when they saw them, others whispered, but the tone had changed. The whispers were no longer sharp. They were curious, even kind. Samuel helped carry benches and set up tables. Clara joined a group of women who were serving food. As the evening went on, the space filled with laughter and shared stories. A young boy ran up to Samuel holding a small wooden toy.
"My mother said you helped my uncle with his fence," he said. "Thank you."
Samuel smiled and knelt down. "I'm glad I could help." The boy ran off, and Clara watched the moment with a soft smile. She saw how natural kindness was for Samuel. It was not something he tried to show. It was simply who he was. Later, a simple tune began to play, and a few people started to move in slow, gentle steps. Clara hesitated. Then Samuel offered his hand.
"Would you like to?" he asked. She nodded.
They moved together, not with skill, but with care. The world around them seemed to fade as they focused on each other's steps and quiet laughter. For Clara, it felt like a moment she would remember for the rest of her life. For Samuel, it felt like proof that he had finally found a place where he did not have to keep moving. The next morning, Clara and her father talked over breakfast. The light from the window fell across the table.
"You care for him?" her father said. Clara did not deny it.
"I do." He nodded slowly. "I can see it in the way he looks at you. The land teaches us many things, but one of the hardest is knowing when to trust." Clara reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you." That afternoon, Samuel and Clara worked together in the small garden near the house. They planted seeds in the soft soil, pressing them down gently. "Do you think they'll grow well?" Clara asked. Samuel smiled. "With time and care, most things do." She looked at him, understanding the deeper meaning behind his words. A few days later, a letter arrived for Samuel. It was thin and worn. like it had traveled a long way. He held it in his hands for a long moment before opening it. Clara watched from a distance, unsure if she should approach. Samuel read the letter slowly. When he finished, he folded it and placed it back in his pocket. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a hint of the past. Clara walked over. "Is everything okay?" she asked. He nodded. "It's from someone I knew a long time ago. They wanted to know where I ended up." "And where did you tell them?" she asked gently. Samuel looked around at the ranch, the fields, and the wide sky. "I told them I found a place that feels like home." Her heart warmed at his answer. As the weeks passed, the ranch returned to its steady rhythm. The lower field began to dry, and green shoots pushed through the dark soil. The land showed signs of healing, just as the people did. Clara and Samuel grew closer in small, quiet ways. They shared morning walks, late talks under the stars, and simple meals filled with soft laughter. They learned each other's habits, their hopes, and their fears. One evening, Samuel stopped near the old fence at the edge of the property. The sky was painted in deep shades of orange and purple. "I've spent my life moving from one place to another," he said. "I always thought I was looking for work, but I think I was really looking for people." Clara felt her breath catch. "And did you find them?" He looked at her. "I think I did." The moment felt full, even without more words. They stood there, letting the quiet speak for them. Clara's father watched their bond grow with careful eyes. He saw the strength in Samuel's steady presence and the happiness in Clara's smile. He knew that the future would bring hard days, as it always did on the land, but he also knew that they would face them together. That night, as the ranch settled into silence, the stars spread across the sky like a wide promise. Samuel lay awake, thinking about the path that had led him here. Clara lay in her room, thinking about the life she was building step by step. Both felt the same sense of hope. The story that began with a stranger at the station was becoming something deeper, something rooted in trust, shared work, and quiet love. The land would continue to change with the seasons. Storms would come and go, fields would rise and fall, but now there was something steady at the heart of it all. Two people, once strangers, now walking the same path, ready to face whatever came next together. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and blue. The land felt calm, as if it knew something important was about to happen. Clara stood by the window of the main house, looking out across the fields where the grass moved gently in the breeze. She felt a quiet excitement in her chest, mixed with a peaceful sense of certainty. The path she was walking no longer felt unsure. It felt chosen. Outside, Samuel was already awake, helping one of the workers guide the horses toward the open pasture. His movements were steady, his voice calm. He had become a familiar part of the ranch, someone people trusted without question. The man who once arrived with a small bag and tired boots now carried himself with confidence, not because he had gained more things, but because he had found his place. Clara's father joined her by the window. He watched Samuel for a moment, then looked at his daughter. "You've grown," he said softly. But she smiled. "So has he." Her father nodded. "And so has this land, because of him." Later that morning, Clara walked out to the field where Samuel was working. He wiped his hands on his shirt when he saw her, and smiled.
"Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied.
"Can you take a walk with me?" He nodded, and they moved toward the edge of the property, where the old fence stood against the wide sky. The grass was cool under their boots, and the air felt fresh and light. They stopped near the fence, looking out at the open land beyond. For a moment, neither spoke. 2. The silence was comfortable. full of shared understanding. "I used to think my life would always be about moving," Samuel said at last. "I thought staying in one place meant giving something up, but now I see it means building something."
Clara looked at him. "You've built something here?"
"With all of us." He took a deep breath. "And I want to keep building. I want to die up and down, not just on the land, but with you." Her heart beat faster, but she did not look away. "I want that too." They stood there, the wind moving through the grass around them. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for what they would say next. Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple band. It was plain, but it shone softly in the light. "I don't have much to offer," he said, "but I have my time, my work, and my promise to stand by you no matter what comes." Clara felt tears in her eyes, but she smiled. That's more than enough. They did not need big words or grand plans. Their understanding was built on the quiet moments they had shared, the hard days they had faced together, and the trust that had grown between them. When they returned to the house, Clara's father was waiting on the porch. He saw their faces and understood. Samuel stepped forward. "I would like your blessing," he said. "To walk this life with your daughter?" Her father studied him for a long moment. He saw not the man in worn clothes who had stepped off the train, but the man who had stood in rising water, helped his neighbors, and cared for the land as if it were his own. "You have it," he said simply. "You've earned it." The news spread through the ranch and into the town. People came with smiles, kind words, and small gifts. The gathering was planned quickly, but it was filled with warmth and joy. There were no grand decorations, only simple flowers, clean clothes, and the wide sky above them. On the day of the gathering, the land seemed to shine. The sun was gentle, and the breeze was soft. The workers, neighbors, and townspeople gathered near the old tree at the edge of the field. Clara walked toward Samuel, her steps steady, her heart full. Samuel stood waiting, his eyes bright. When she reached him, he took her hands, and the world around them faded into a quiet background. Clara's father spoke a few simple words about trust, work, and standing by one another. There were no long speeches, only honest promises shared between two people who had already proven their care through action. When it was done, the crowd cheered softly, and smiles spread across every face. The gathering turned into a simple celebration, with food, laughter, and stories shared under the open sky. A neighbor clapped Samuel on the back. "You're one of us now," he said. Samuel smiled. "I've felt that for a while." As the day turned into evening, the lights softened and the stars began to appear. Clara and Samuel stood a little apart from the crowd, watching the people they now called their own. "I never thought a place could feel like this," Samuel said. "Full, even when it's quiet." Clara leaned against him. "That's what happens when you build something together." Later that night, when the ranch grew still, they walked back to the house under the wide sky. The stars stretched out above them, countless and bright. Samuel looked up. "I used to look at the sky and feel small," he said. Now it makes me feel like I belong to something bigger." Clara smiled. "You do." The days that followed were not perfect. The land still needed work. The seasons still brought challenges. But now, every task felt lighter because it was shared. Samuel and Clara worked side by side in the fields, in the garden, and in the barns. They welcomed neighbors who needed help and offered kindness without being asked. The ranch became a place people came to for more than just work. It became a place of comfort and trust. Clara's father watched them with quiet pride. He saw the way they supported each other, how they faced each problem together, not as two people, but as one teen. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Samuel and Clara sat on the porch, the same place where so many of their conversations had begun. "Do you ever think about the day we met?" Clara asked. Samuel laughed softly. "All the time. I almost turned back before I got on that train." She looked at him in surprise. "Why?" "I wasn't sure I was ready to be seen," he said. "To let people know who I really was." She took his hand. "I'm glad you didn't turn back." He squeezed her hand. "So am I." The land stretched out before them, wide and open, filled with the promise of more days to come. The story that began with a stranger stepping off a train had become a life built on trust, effort, and quiet love. Under the endless sky, they sat together, not thinking about what they had gained or lost, but about what they were still building: a home, a future, and a place where both of them truly belonged.